Story 1. Henry Blake on Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. They killed him off on his flight home. When Radar announced the death to the surgery in the final scene of the episode, Gary Berghoff was the only one of the entire cast who knew about it in advance. The producers wanted a genuine reaction. Story 2. Herschel from The Walking Dead was the moral compass. Losing him felt like losing hope in the group. Story 3. Bro, when Mufasa died in The Lion King, I legitimately sat there staring at the screen like, nah, he's gonna get up, right? Simba's crying. He's got to get up. I was like 7, and that scene gave me my first existential crisis. Scar didn't just kill Mufasa. He murdered a piece of my childhood. Story 4. Spock in Wrath of Khan. He was my favorite character, the most recognizable in the whole franchise, and he died saving the ship. Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human. Story 5. I do not want to give away any spoilers, but I cried when that character died. I do not cry much. Story 6. Shireen Baratheon. As a father of a young daughter with the screaming in the background, the scene of her at the stake from Game of Thrones nearly brought me to tears. Story 7. Fred in Angel. She was such a lovable character, and her death scene was absolutely horrible. She was killed by the person she had a crush on. Story 8. Tony Stark. He saved everyone and still did not get to see the world he made possible. That one hurt. Story 9. Spoiler for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Joyce Summers. I will never forget how I felt when I first watched that episode. Story 10. Ned Stark. Because winter came with a side of wait, what? And broke my heart faster than his head hit the chopping block. Story 11. Okay, they do not die, but they sure set it up to look like it. Homeward Bound. Sassy and the waterfall and Shadow in the mud pit. I was a mess at 6 years old, and then the happy ending came and I was okay. That movie woke little girl me up to life and death. Story 12. Where the Red Fern Grows. I do not think I need to expand on that. I will never forget my teacher reading the end out loud while my classmates and I, a group of 4th graders, sobbed uncontrollably and passed tissue boxes around. Story 13. Wallace from The Wire is the kindest, sweetest character, killed by his also kind and sweet childhood friends. It represents the loss of innocence for everyone in that dreadful scene. To be honest, most of the deaths in that show were devastating. The death of Omar is a close second. I am not sure if there is a substitute for accidental Shakespeare, but the death of Stringer was an absolute Macbeth moment. Story 14. Spoilers. A tie between Maze Hughes and Nina Tucker from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Both because of how they were killed and what led to their deaths. Maze put his nose where he shouldn't have and was executed for it. Nina had a horrid father who would sacrifice anything to keep a pocket watch. Honestly, the entire anime is filled with emotional moments. One that always gets me is when Winry finds out why her parents died and who was responsible. The whole anime is just amazing. Story 15. Fry's dog in the Futurama episode, Jurassic Bark. I was absolutely stunned the first time I saw it. I can't watch that episode if it comes on television. I remember watching it at my friend's house with 4 of my friends and brothers. I had to excuse myself at the end and said I was going to the bathroom, but I actually just went in there to cry my eyes out. Story 16. Gus in Lonesome Dove. You spend so long with him, and Larry McMurtry does such an incredible job of fleshing him out that it really feels like losing a friend by the time all is said and done. Story 17. Anakin Skywalker. His character is too amazing and compelling to die. He also died in his son's arms, which was absolutely heartbreaking. Padme Skywalker. If she hadn't died, Anakin wouldn't have turned to the dark side, and the twins wouldn't have had to be separated. Tadashi Hamada, Big Hero 6, reminded me deeply of losing my older brother and not getting to say goodbye, especially since the movie came out 3 years after he passed. I can't watch the movie without becoming a sobbing mess. Matthew Crawley, Downton Abbey. He died the day his son was born. Lady Sybil, Downton Abbey. Her death was completely preventable. Her father chose to listen to a high-status doctor who was mistaken over a humble doctor. She also died the day her daughter was born. Ellie up. If you didn't find her death heartbreaking, you might be heartless. Sirius Black, Harry Potter. Harry finally had someone who truly cared for him and didn't abuse him. But Sirius was suddenly killed in front of Harry. Harry's reaction made it even more heartbreaking. Story 18, Charlie in Lost. The All Dogs Go to Heaven dogs. I can't remember the names. The mom in Land Before Time, Bambi's mother, and Mufasa. More recently, Joel. I didn't play the games, so I didn't know it was coming. Story 19, Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2. Scenes from the Walking Dead television series include Daryl putting down his zombie brother Merle, Glenn's death, Carol finding her daughter as a zombie, the standoff between Rick and Shane that resulted in Shane's death, and Rick crying about it, which was emotional. Rick's reaction to his wife's death, Herschel's death, the scene where Carol sees her adoptive son Henry being killed and beheaded on a stick. Rick and Carol are two of my favorite characters because of how much they both lost in the series. Story 20. Jack Dawson in Titanic impacted me deeply, and I hated that Jack died, but I understand that his death was necessary. Otherwise, you don't fully appreciate the loss of the disaster. Similarly, in my favorite television series about World War I, The Passing Bells, the main character died, and I hated that because they died in a particularly pointless way. But again, it helps to emphasize the loss which we might not otherwise fully appreciate. Overall, my least favorite character death, just for sheer brutality of death in concept, is Matthew in Downton Abbey. They had to kill him off because the actor wanted to leave. Story 21. Starting from the beginning, John Henry, the steel-driving man, worked his hardest and died winning. A hard lesson for a child. I watched an animated film in 2nd or 3rd grade and just lost it. Artax from The Never-Ending Story. Charlie from All Dogs Go to Heaven. Thank you, Don Bluth. You knew how to hit children in the heart. The Terminator from Terminator 2. Judgment Day. This sounds silly, but his redemption arc was complete, and it was sad to see him go. And to top it off, in the wonderful year of 1991. Thomas J. From My Girl. It was an avoidable death, but poignant because it reflected young love insistent on heroics. He literally gave his life to find her ring. There are others, but those were the formative years. Story 22. Brooks was here. If you know, you know. Because I am old now too, and I feel like he did. I want the pain and anxiety to end as well. Story 23. Professor Snape from Harry Potter and Glenn from The Walking Dead. I was staring at the screen blankly for a very long time and was shocked. Story 24. I am not a fan of the show and did not watch much of it, but the Federal Bureau of Investigation agent from Sons of Anarchy forced to sit in the front of the car. The actress did a great job portraying someone who knew they were going to die. I genuinely felt bad for her. Story 25. Beak, Malazan Book of the Fallen. I cry every time. If it doesn't crush you, then you aren't human. He is so innocent. Then afterwards, the hand gripping his arm was skeletal, the skin a strange hue of green. The figure, very tall, was hooded and wearing black rags. I seemed to be studying the gate. Is that where I'm supposed to go now? Beak asked. Yes. All right. Are you coming with me? No. All right. Well, will you let go of my arm then? The hand fell away. It is not common, the figure then said. What? That I attend to arrivals. In person. My name is Beak. Yes. What's through there? Your brother waits for you, Beak. He has been waiting a long time. Beak smiled and stepped forward, all at once in a great hurry. The silver light within that gate was beautiful, reminding him of something. The stranger's voice brought him round. Beak. Yes. Your brother. He will not know you yet. Do you understand? Beak nodded. My brother, Beak said, his smile broadening. I'm there now. Stronger. I can save him, can't I? A long pause, and then the figure said, Yes, Beak, you can save him. Reaper's Gale, Malazan Book of the Fallen, Stephen Erickson. Story 26. I wouldn't say it hit me hardest, but Dominic Santiago from Gears of War genuinely hurt. I played all the Gears of War games with my friend and always played as Dominic Santiago. Then he does the thing and boom, gone. Story 27. The girl in Bridge to Terabithia. I wanted to walk out of the movie. I had no idea that was the plot. Story 28. Roy Fokker, Macross/Robotech. Specifically, the crazy English novelization. The novelization of Robotech added many details that the show, either as Macross or Robotech, did not have. One of these was Fokker's second-in-command, a man named Captain Kramer. Kramer was mentioned occasionally as a longtime friend and wingman to Roy. They had served together through World War III and had survived when many had not. The novelization emphasized how brutal combat was with variable fighters, the high casualty rates, but Roy and I, as a kid, believed that at least Fokker and Kramer would always make it. Then, during one particular battle, Kramer takes a bad hit, and Roy calls for him to eject. He is distracted enough that his Entrati battlesuit strafes his fighter, and he feels sharp pain stabbing him in the back. He is clearly wounded but stays in the fight, making sure Kramer has ejected before turning back into the dogfight unfolding around him. Eventually, he lands his fighter after the battle is over, and the technicians discover the entire cockpit is soaked with his blood. He is rushed to surgery, very much out of it, but he asks about Kramer. Did he make it? Did search and rescue find him? No. The surgeon apologizes sadly. Kramer was found dead in the water from his injuries. This loss ultimately kills Roy Fokker. The loss of his friend is such a psychological blow that he removes his sneaks out of the emergency ward, and dresses in his uniform to see his girlfriend because he needs her to know how much he loves her. As he is bleeding out on her couch, Claudia is berating him out of concern, not noticing anything because she is preparing a pineapple salad. She says she wishes he would stop playing those games out there in the sky. It frightens her. It's never been a game, Claudia. You know that. Then he passes away, unable to tell her that he loves her. In his final moments, he sees all his old squad mates he used to fly with. Kramer is there, handing him his helmet. He flies into the light in a new variable fighter, slicker than anything he had ever seen before. It is strange, but that is okay. This is the big one. After this, he will never have to fly again. After this, he can tell Claudia what she means to him, and then he is gone. This affected me deeply for about a week as a kid. Story 29. The 10th Doctor. I was about 16 and watched the entire new series. I have only cried like that twice. Story 30. The Iron Giant. The whole sequence leading up to it. The dialogue. The animation. The colors. All of it. You stay. I go. No following Superman. God. It chokes me up just writing it. Story 31. I went to see The Sixth Sense before there were spoilers. I had no idea it was even a suspense movie. I thought it would be an action movie. My mother and I went on our first day of vacation and were in shock for the next few days. Story 32. Joel's daughter Sarah in The Last of Us Part 1. The way the voice actress sputtered and whimpered like a real little girl made the scene affect me deeply. It felt as if the director of that part of the game had personally experienced it. Story 33. The strong rebellion occurred mainly because I did not expect the entire uprising to be easily defeated. Story 34. Artax. I do not care if he was alive at the end of the movie. He sank into the swamp of sadness and took the hearts of a generation with him. Story 35. The death of the young husband during his wedding night in James Clavell's Noble House series hit me so hard that I quit reading. Took several years before I returned to the series. I really liked that character, and his ending was abrupt and shocking during the highest moment for him so far. Story 36. Nacho in Better Call Saul. I wanted him to be able to get out of the game and work with his father. I loved Nacho. Story 37. The night before my high school graduation party, I couldn't sleep, so I decided to watch The Champ with Jonathan Voight and Ricky Schroeder. Watching Ricky Schroeder try to get the champ to wake up caused me to cry like I never had before. I went to that party with swollen eyes. Story 38. Joel from The Last of Us. All the time Joel and Ellie spent together in both bad and good times, and he passed away like that. Joel was a good character with all his flaws and psychological issues. Story 39, Optimus Prime in 1986. I was about 8 years old. Artax is very difficult to lose if you have a pet. Story 40. I'm gonna go in a completely different direction here. Gears of War 2. Benjamin Carmine. Yes, as expected, all Carmines die, but his death alone hurt me as a kid. Story 41. Ace from One Piece. I watched it a long time ago, almost as a child. They made us feel he would live just to forget. Story 42. I remember an episode from Highway to Heaven where Michael's character was dressed as a bird to raise environmental awareness and died. His sidekick was crying for people to stop littering. Weeks later, I heard Michael had died from cancer. I still remember this. Story 43. All the major characters are already mentioned, so I am going with Tara from Buffy. Her character was great and beloved by most fans. Then one episode, she was no longer a special guest star in the additional credits but a main cast member in the opening credits, which made me really happy to finally see her and happy for Amber Benson as a series regular. Only to find out it was a twist because that was the episode where she died. In the end, regarding the story's writing, her death was short-sighted and pointless. Story 44. Prim Everdeen. I don't remember why her in particular. I just remember the shock of crying over a book. Normally, it is the sad movie music that gets me. Story 45. Bridge to Terabithia. I watched it when I was probably 13, and that was the first time I was left speechless and almost unable to accept what happened. Story 46. Mine's literary. When Chewbacca had a moon dropped on him in the novel Vector Prime. I almost stopped reading the book and the series it is part of. I was very upset. Story 47. Joel Miller from The Last of Us. I was stunned. I thought he would last for more seasons since he is one of the main characters. Story 48. Primrose Everdeen is the entire motivation for the saga, and they kill her in the end anyway. I cried like a baby for 4 hours. Story 49. Lance Sweets and Bones rips right through me every time I watch it. Bobby Nash in 911. I am still not ready to talk about it. Haley Hotchner in Criminal Minds. Just thinking about it now, I can feel a lump in my throat. Story 50. Quentin Coldwater struggled with depression and a sense of not belonging. When he died, it deeply affected those who knew him. Story 51. Omar Devone Little, played by Michael Kenneth Williams, in The Wire. I shut the show off at that point and wept. It was like a blow to the chest. Unexpected, senseless, devastating. Michael's actual death a few years later was equally devastating. Story 52. Dewey in Scream 5. My boy went through so much protecting everyone for years and years, dragged back into a world he did not need to be a part of, just to get killed by some depressed kids who did not like the latest Stab movie. Story 53. Does the main character in the video game Rhyme count? I was in tears when the realization hit me. One game I will never play again because the emotional scarring is just too much. Story 54. Natayam from Avatar. Rue from The Hunger Games. Liz from The Blacklist. I know how greatly she was disliked, but that scene was brutal. Story 55. Egwene in The Wheel of Time was disappointing. Her character underwent significant transformations, and I was definitely caught off guard. Story 56. Chef from South Park. He was the only sane adult and always helped the children in any way he could. Story 57. The game I play, called Dragon Fable, killed off the innkeeper character. She became very important to the story over time, and her death was tied to a community event. It was scripted that we would lose, but none of us knew that at the time. Imagine spending hours fighting hordes and trying to help others do the same to increase a number on a meter, all to reach this character who has been there since the start of the game and is now key to the story, and then she dies. It is not a pretty death. In fact, players who had an item from a previous quest in their inventory helped kill her. Her character model was removed from the inn and eventually replaced with a new character. Recently, the game had an update to help unstick the story tracker. As a result, everyone had to redo the quests where she dies. Now, she is back in the inn, and many players have accepted that their story tracker will remain stuck at the Calamity Saga. Story 58. Fred Weasley. I cried a lot. The fanfiction about George naming his son Fred and them cutting a cake together with the line, "After years, Fred and George celebrated their birthday together," did not help at all. Story 59, wow. Not one person mentioned Fitz Chivalry Farcer from Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. I took years off from reading physical books after that series. Story 60. When Triss died in Allegiant, I had recently stopped taking my psychiatric medications, and my emotions came flooding back. Story 61. Mufasa. My dad and mom had just gotten divorced, and I was having issues with the whole thing. That scene really upset me. It still makes me cry. The scene made me imagine my stepfather as Scar and my dad as Mufasa. My dad was doing everything he could to make my life perfect, and my unpleasant stepfather was trying to take me away from him. That is how my brain perceived the scene. It's all good though. My dad is the best ever. The stepfather vanished, but I still cry when I see that scene. Story 62. Gus in Lonesome Dove. I have read that book 10 times and I still cry. Opie in Sons of Anarchy and Juice. Story 63. Murphy Battleground, The Dresden Files. I pre-ordered the book. I was so upset that I threw it on the ground, and it took 6 months before I picked it up again. I am still upset, and that book is almost 5 years old. I am dragging myself through rereading the series because I do not want to go through that again. Story 64. I remember a news article about someone taking their own life over the death of Itachi from Naruto. There may be more to the story, but it has been a long time, and the post brought back the memory. Unrelated, but since these memories are connected, I also recall a child dying in a sandbox because 2 kids wanted to reenact a scene from Naruto where Gaara uses a move called Sand Coffin to crush his foe. The child was buried alive in sand. They were just having fun. There is probably more to the story, but that is all I remember. Story 65. I cried harder when Theon Greyjoy died in Game of Thrones than any other character. I am sure the vodka helped because I was pretty well intoxicated. But that one tear deserved its own Emmy. Story 66. 2 characters from Fullmetal Alchemist and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Nina and, a bit later on, Maze. If you know, you know. If you do not know, go watch Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. It is one of the best anime series from the late 2000s. Story 67. Rita, Dexter's wife. My entire friend group mourned her death. We even placed her picture on the Day of the Dead altar. Story 68. I recently read Revival by Stephen King, and there was a death early in the book that maybe I should have seen coming, but I did not, and it hit pretty hard. I have been getting into Stephen King quite a bit lately, and he can be quite cruel to the reader at times, in a way that is actually quite satisfying. He gives you a nasty shock, but then you feel like, well played, Mr. King. Well played. I also love the juxtaposition of regular vague foreshadowing of future events and the occasional blunt force trauma, along the lines of, but of course he would be dead 2 weeks later. Also, there is a very naughty sort of double twist in Pet Sematary. Story 69, Buck Zimmer, Clear and Present Danger, the book. U.S. Air Force Senior Master Sergeant and Crew Chief of the Sikorsky MH-53 Pave-Low helicopter used for covert troop insertions and later for the rescue mission. Mortally wounded by ground fire during the rescue, he later dies in Ryan's arms. Ryan vows to financially help his family, a Laotian wife and 7 children living in Florida, and keeps his word. I remember choking up at this part. Story 70. Beatrice Triss Pryor from Divergent. The books was so unexpected to me, and I was quite upset by it. Story 71. Red Dead Redemption 2 spoilers ahead. Arthur Morgan. He felt so real, like someone I had known personally. I related a lot of my own personal struggles to his. I was crying with a runny nose as, that's the way it is played. My fiancé was hugging and consoling me a lot during that part of the game. It is a memory I cherish. We are still together today and just had our 7-year anniversary. Story 72. I was about 12 years old and a fan of the television police drama Hill Street Blues. The episode featured a man calling himself Captain Freedom who gets shot while trying to stop armed robbers. It affected me deeply. I probably should not have been watching the show at that age, but my parents allowed me. I cried bitterly when that lovable, quirky character was killed. Story 73, Buffy's mom in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Michelle Gellar went from being a badass slayer to a scared little girl in a fraction of a second. It breaks me every time I see it. Story 74, potentially obscure one here but Ives from The Great Escape. You could take your pick of the deaths from that movie, but hearing him earlier talk about just how close he is to jumping the wire is the most sickening foreshadowing to when he actually does it. From celebrating to dead in 3 minutes. Story 75. There is a young adult author named Libba Bray who, in my opinion, writes some really awesome creepy fantasy books. She always seems to find a way to kill the character with the purest heart or the most innocence. She has left me crying at the end of more than one trilogy or series. Story 76. All of these are okay. Do you want the emotional moments? Beak from Malazan Book of the Fallen. 15 rereads. And I still get chills when I see It's Okay to Die with Your Friends. Story 77. Tonks and Remus Lupin. It's not that I really like them, but the way their deaths are shown. Their bodies lying next to each other in the film, their hands touching, and the fact that they had just had a son, along with Lupin's difficult life. This whole scene deeply affected me. Story 78. Hedwig was so loyal, so brave, and such a great support to Harry. She didn't deserve that. In my headcanon, she survived, was found, and brought to Hagrid for rehabilitation. Story 79. Sam the dog in I Am Legend. The first time I watched it, I thought the cure worked. But it did not, and he had to put her out of her misery. I tear up every time. Story 80. As an impressionable young boy back in the day, Aerith from Final Fantasy VII left a deep impression. The first time I saw a character die. Story 81. Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2. The second half of his life was spent trying to redeem himself from his past sins. He contracted tuberculosis and gradually grew weaker over time, going from a brute enforcer to a dying deer. He made great efforts to forgive and help everyone. His own father figure practically abandoned him for not being crazy and for wanting to help the Native Americans instead of using them as a distraction from the United States Army. His entire adopted family was split in two following a traitor who never liked anyone. His last dying view was his father figure standing over him, looking angry at himself over his bloody and coughing son. He never realized when he made the mistake of not listening to him. Then he just walks away. The song also hits really hard when he overlooks the sunrise in the mountains. Over the last parts of his life, his eyes express it all. His own family saw him as a disaster and someone who lost faith. To see a loving gang of people go from that to a disgruntled mess of murderers and criminals break someone down. His father figure, Dutch van der Linde, really lets his true personality show by the end of the story. He even lets members of his own gang, his sons and daughters, die over miscommunication. The musical track that best describes his death, from Red Dead Redemption 2, is "The day is done, time has come. You battled hard, the war is won. You did your worst, you tried your best. Now it's time to rest." Another original soundtrack that fits is "That's the Way It Is." The many miles we walked, the many things we learned. The building of a shrine only just to burn. That's the way it is. The entire gang worked together for decades building this family, only for all that to be wasted over Dutch's mind becoming more irrational, making more mistakes over time, and his sons dying because of that. He lost his right-hand man of logical sense. Replacing him, Dutch chose Micah Bell, the new gang member nobody liked. Micah antagonized the entire gang multiple times and caused the death of almost 6 members. The final nail in the coffin was that Micah was a rat, informing the police and people hunting the gang. He also told Dutch that Arthur and John were the real rats all along. Story 82. It is only about a year old, so I am going to be slightly vague just in case. I will just say this, remember it. Story 83. Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2. You choose between 4 endings depending on how well you play. The high honor ending, which is the good ending, involves helping John reach his family. His death is genuinely the most emotional moment I have seen in any fiction. Story 84. Miriam from A Thousand Splendid Suns absolutely broke me. When the Taliban officer offers her a cookie, I just could not take it. Story 85, Bambi's Mom. Bambi was the first movie I saw in theaters when I was a kid. It was an early introduction to death and loss. Story 86, the main female character's death in the anime movie, I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. 10 out of 10. I would cry my heart out again because it was such a beautiful and heartbreaking movie. Story 87, Bambi's Mother. My mother took me to the movie theater to see it when I was 5 years old. I remember loving the beginning with Bambi playing with Thumper and trying to walk on the ice. When Bambi's mother was shot and he was looking around the forest calling for her, I couldn't take it. I was inconsolable, and my mother had to take me home. To this day, I have never seen the rest of the movie, and I am 55. Story 88, Sheridan from Babylon 5. Not his actual death, but leaving Delenn and going for a Sunday drive. If you know, you know. Story 89, Gandalf made me cry when I first saw the movies as a kid. Now Boromir affects me deeply. Our people, he says, dying with sword in hand. Story 90, Oberyn, we had already lost Eddard and Robb Stark. Then this new cool character appeared. I instantly liked him, and seeing him die because he was careless and overly confident was hard. Story 91, Eddie Munson. I related to him deeply, and it hurt to see him die. When will a unique individual be allowed to thrive in this world? Story 92, Hartman in Battlefield 5's last campaign mission. The young soldier just wanted to go home after suffering unknown hardships in the field. Story 93, Moulin Rouge. My mother died in my father's arms when they were barely 30. Seeing Satine die so suddenly and the cries of the Christians, the wailing, makes me think of them. I can never hold it together. Also, even though it was not a death, John Crichton in Farscape during the end of the Peacekeeper Wars. Story 94. A simple cat was just trying to protect its owner. It was slammed against a wall and then stomped on by a pseudo-Space Marine knockoff in power armor. Its last word was Hannah, the name of the girl, when the boot crushed it. Kinslayer from the Lotus War trilogy by J. Kristoff. The book was pretty good, but you did not have to do him like that. Story 95, Deadwood. Hearst's man flat out assassinated Ellsworth after he married Alma. Enough motivation from that one act to drive a full season of episodes for me. Story 96, Derek in Grey's Anatomy. I only watched the series recently and binged it. I was not aware of the personal lives of the actors at the time or that he wanted to leave the series. It was heartbreaking. Story 97, Death of Jimmy Hoffa, because until the last second I did not believe that he would get shot. It was so unnecessary. Story 98, my parents took my sister and me to see Star Trek, Nemesis. When the movie ended and the lights came on, my mom was in tears after one character died at the end. She is not even a big Star Trek fan, and it still crushed her. Story 99, I typically do not make it through Boromir's death without crying at least a little. It is such a heroic last stand, and it shows who he really is. It hits hard, especially if you spent the Fellowship of the Ring disliking him on your first watch. Story 100, Timothy from the book The K made a strong impression on me when I read it in elementary school. It is a classic example of sacrificing yourself for someone you care about. Story 101, Hank and his partner from Breaking Bad were good people and did not deserve to be taken out like that. Story 102, Maybe Hotter. It is hard to get upset over characters. After all, I have seen and read about so many fictional deaths over the years. But that was just kind of sad. He was destined to be used as a doorstopper, and nobody listened. Story 103, I remember reading Harry Potter where Sirius dies and crying loudly at that page. Obligatory strong dislike of J.K. Rowling. Story 104, James Bond has many reasons to be memorable. I have watched every film in the theater since Live and Let Die. I was conceived after my parents saw Thunderball. My middle name is Sean because of that. A bald billionaire bought the franchise. That marked the end of an era. I have little hope for what Amazon will do with the rights. I have traveled to many places that Bond visited in the films. It was always nice to have a tour guide before the internet. I shall use my time wisely. Story 105. Jack Shepherd in Lost. In my life, I struggle to let go of things and move on, and I saw myself in Jack. When he died and saw his father, it was the hardest I have ever cried for a television show because he finally did move on and let go. Story 106. Izzy hands from our flag means Death experiences some of the worst situations imaginable, survives, and finally finds kinship and joy. Then he is killed off in a way that does not advance the plot. Yes, I am still upset. Story 107. Joel from The Last of Us. His death was, in my opinion, shockingly cruel and brutal. I was horrified and heartbroken. I know it is just a video game and it is all fictional, but that really hit me like a freight train. Story 108. Rachel from the Animorphs. She knows she is being sent to her death by her own cousin, and she knows he does not have a choice because she is the only one fierce enough to pull it off. Mostly, though, it is because of this line. I wanted so much to live. I wanted so much to stay and not to leave. In a moment, no answer would matter to me, but just the same, I wanted to know what I guess any dying person wants to know. Answer this, Alimist. Did I make a difference? My life and my death. Was I worth it? Did my life really matter? Yes, he said. You were brave. You were strong. You were good. You mattered. Yeah. Okay then. Story 109. Spoiler for Hunter's Descent by Alice Winters. The main character has a pet betta fish named Sir Reginald. At the end of the book, the building he is in is destroyed. This scene brought me to my knees, not just crying but wailing, as it deeply affected me emotionally. After several minutes of severe emotional distress, it is revealed that he survived. I have reread the book several times and still have to skip that whole section. Story 110. Sherlock Holmes in the Adventure of the Final Problem. I remember reading, "It is with a heavy heart that I," and thinking, wait, what? Sidney Carton, A Tale of Two Cities. Story 111. Sherlock Holmes in the Adventure of the Final Problem. I remember reading, "It is with a heavy heart," and thought, wait, what? But this answer does not really work here. Sidney Carton, A Tale of Two Cities. Story 112. The Kid from Pay It Forward. For a long time, hearing the funeral song always made me feel like I had to cry. Story 113. Rita from Dexter. Man, that really affected me. Deb at the end was awful too. Story 114. Julie Mao. Courageous and dedicated. She risked everything to stand up for what is right. A painful, tortured, solitary death for the benefit of the bad guys. Story 115. Mordin Solus from Mass Effect. I had to take a couple of days off from playing the game to process his death the first time. Story 116. Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's. He had so much to live for, and what those two young men did to him was just horrible. He deserved better. Story 117. Most of the main cast in Devilman Crybaby in that scene. Literally traumatic. Had me horrified and crying my heart out. Story 118. Thomas J. from My Girl was one of the first times I experienced a death where the person was a kid my age. You never think about your mortality when you are a child, so when you see someone your age dying, it hits hard. He can't see without his glasses. Story 119. Daenerys Targaryen dying the way she did after that deeply flawed character arc really affected me. It stayed with me for months, and I am still upset about it. Story 120. I might have missed it, but I scrolled the comments and did not see either one, Jiraiya from Naruto or Yusuke when he dies during Chapter Black. Only because of Kuwabara's reaction. Story 121. Joy of Midworld. Because he is a four-legged hero who saved the universe. Because he loved his boy Jake. Story 122. Captain Kirk in Star Trek Generations. I wouldn't say it hit me hard emotionally, but it really upset me that such a legendary character I had grown up with was given such a disappointing ending. He literally gave up everything. He was in paradise and gave it up to help Captain Jean-Luc Picard. And for what? To come back for 10 minutes and then fall off a bridge. As you can probably tell, it still upsets me 30 years later. Story 123. I think back to about 1973. Gwen Stacy. I was 14, and there had never been any deaths of main characters in comic books. Peter Parker was so in love with her, and then she died. To be fair, my adolescent brain was kind of in a crush on her too, as I was a total nerd and, at 14, of course, never had a girlfriend. 6 years later, one of the women I worked with, whom I had a crush on, died in a car accident on Christmas Eve. They brought her into the emergency room where I worked. I went into a funk for weeks and failed my final exams. At that time, finals were given at the beginning of January at our school. Story 124. Cedric Diggory did not willingly join up as the others did after him. He was a civilian and therefore, to me, the most tragic. Story 125. Technically not a death, but the player in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Sky. I was a kid playing a Pokemon game. There was no way I could have expected or prepared for that. Story 126. Howard Ratner in Uncut Gems. I know he is a terrible character, not poorly written, just a bad person, but the movie is so intense it made me feel like an accomplice to his crimes. I wanted him to thrive so badly. I had to pick up my jaw from the floor at that ending. I might have screamed a dramatic "no" when he died. Story 127. Logan Echolls in Veronica Mars. Why give us the ultimate pairing for 3 seasons and 2 movies just to kill him off in the last 5 minutes in such a lazy way? Feels like a slap in the face to fans. They could have put him on a super long deployment or something instead of having the annoying guy from King of Queens kill him off. It still makes me angry. Story 128. Bill left 4 Dead 2. I don't know how to explain it, but these characters feel like family the way they interact with each other. Story 129. Jean Valjean from Les Miserables. It is the important song that goes with it. By the end of the show, you understand what that melody means. Story 130. Charlie and Bobby from Supernatural. Both of them were the boys' chosen family, and they were both taken from them. Story 131. Very niche comics reference. The glyph in the Ballad of Halo Jones. Nobody died today, and toy in book 3. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.